My name is Sophie, and I'm 25 years old. I've built a good life for myself in Chicago as a marketing executive. Everything was going well until yesterday, when I received a text from my parents after a year of complete silence. They kicked me out of their lives because of my sister's pregnancy, even though I had nothing to do with it. The irony is that now they want to reconnect, but I've already learned to live without their conditional love. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to create your own family when your blood relatives let you down. Growing up in a small town in Ohio wasn't easy, especially with parents like Thomas and Martha Wilson. They weren't just religious, they were pillars of our local church community. My father was an elder, and my mother led the women's ministry. Our family was always in the spotlight, expected to be the perfect example of Christian living. This meant strict rules, modest clothing, monitored friendships, and absolutely no questioning of authority. My older sister Bethany was 2 years my senior and the epitome of the perfect daughter. She got straight A's, led the church youth group dressed modestly, never broke curfew, and dated only boys who had been pre-approved by our parents. By the time she was 27, she was engaged to Kevin, the son of another pastor in a neighboring town. Their relationship was the culmination of years of supervised courtship, with barely any physical contact beyond hand-holding. The wedding was planned for the following summer, and everyone expected them to start a picture-perfect Christian family immediately afterward. Then there was me, Sophie Wilson, the black sheep of the family. I wasn't rebellious in the traditional sense, no drugs, no wild parties, but I asked questions. I wondered why women in our church couldn't be leaders. I questioned why my science textbook at our Christian school contradicted what I read in other books. I wanted to understand different perspectives rather than accepting that ours was the only right way to live. Sophie, your curiosity is going to lead you astray, my mother would warn whenever she caught me reading books that weren't explicitly Christian. My father was more direct. There's a fine line between seeking knowledge and inviting the devil's influence. Despite our differences, Bethany and I were close as children. She was my protector, the one who would cover for me when I stayed up late reading forbidden books under my covers with a flashlight. We shared secrets and dreams, even though hers always aligned with our parents' expectations, while mine diverged. As we grew older, though, the gap between us widened. Bethany leaned harder into our parents' worldview while I pulled away. After high school, I did the unthinkable. I applied to colleges outside our community. My parents had expected me to attend the same Christian college as Bethany, but I secured a scholarship to Northwestern University in Chicago. The fights were endless, but for once, I stood my ground. "We didn't raise you to chase worldly success," my father thundered when I announced my decision. "This isn't about success," I tried to explain. "It's about finding my own path." "Your path should be the one God laid out for you," my mother countered, tears in her eyes. "Not one you choose for yourself out of pride." Nevertheless, I went. Those 4 years in Chicago transformed me. I discovered I was good at marketing with a knack for understanding what motivates people. I made friends from different backgrounds who exposed me to new ideas without trying to convert me. I found a small, progressive church that embraced questions rather than shutting them down. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. After graduation, I landed a job at a respected marketing firm in Chicago and decided to stay. My parents were disappointed, but seemed to accept that they couldn't control me anymore. I maintained contact through monthly visits back home and weekly phone calls, trying to preserve what relationship we could have despite our differences. During these visits, I noticed how the dynamic with Bethany had shifted. The sister who once whispered secrets with me now seemed uncomfortable when I talked about my life in Chicago. She would change the subject whenever I mentioned my friends or my work, steering conversations back to church activities or her wedding plans with Kevin. It hurt, but I understood she had chosen her path, just as I had chosen mine. "I pray for you every day," she would tell me, her eyes reflecting genuine concern. "I just want you to find your way back to what matters." "I haven't lost what matters," I would respond. "I've just found a different way to honor it." She never understood what I meant by that. To Bethany, there was only one right way to live, and I wasn't following it. My parents' disappointment in my worldly lifestyle remained a constant undercurrent in our interactions. Despite my successful career, my volunteer work with underprivileged kids, and my personal happiness, they saw only what was missing: a husband from our denomination, regular attendance at their church, and submission to their version of faith. Every accomplishment I shared was met with a subtle reminder of what they considered my failings. "That's nice, dear, but remember that success in this world means nothing in the eyes of the Lord," my mother would say after I excitedly told her about a promotion. I learned to share less, to keep parts of myself private. It was easier than facing their disapproval. Little did I know that this fragile balance we had established was about to shatter completely. Last Thanksgiving was unseasonably cold in Ohio. I remember shivering as I walked from my rental car to my parents' front door, a bottle of wine in one hand and a homemade pumpkin pie in the other. I had brought my friend Jackson along, not as a date, though my parents immediately assumed he was, despite my explanations. Jackson was gay, something I didn't share with my family, knowing their views, and one of my closest friends in Chicago. He had no plans for the holiday, so I invited him to experience a traditional family Thanksgiving, though I warned him it might be uncomfortable. "I grew up with conservative parents too," he assured me. "I can handle it. Besides, I'm curious to see where the infamous Sophie Wilson came from." The moment we stepped through the door, I could feel the tension. My mother's smile was tight as she greeted Jackson with a stiff hug. My father shook his hand firmly, but didn't maintain eye contact. Only my grandmother showed genuine warmth, patting Jackson's cheek and telling him he was too skinny before insisting he sit next to her at dinner. Bethany and Kevin were already there, sitting close together on the living room sofa, but barely interacting. I noticed immediately that something was off. Bethany, usually animated when discussing wedding plans, was quiet and withdrawn. She hugged me briefly, but avoided much conversation. Kevin seemed tense, his usual friendly demeanor replaced with a forced politeness. "Everything okay?" I whispered to Bethany when I caught her alone in the kitchen. "Fine," she replied too quickly. "Just tired from all the planning." Dinner was a stilted affair. My father said a lengthy grace emphasizing the importance of family and godly living, while shooting pointed glances at Jackson and me. My mother kept steering the conversation toward church matters and away from any mention of my life in Chicago. Bethany barely touched her food, and Kevin kept placing his hand on hers reassuringly under the table, thinking no one noticed. When my mother brought out the dessert, her famous apple pie alongside my pumpkin offering, Bethany suddenly stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "I have something to say," she announced, her voice trembling. The table fell silent. My father set down his fork, brow furrowed in concern. My mother reached for her water glass, gripping it tightly. "Kevin and I," Bethany paused, tears welling in her eyes. "We're going to have a baby." The silence that followed was deafening. In any other family, this might have been a moment for celebration, but I knew instantly what this meant in ours. Bethany was unmarried. In my parents' world, this was a catastrophic moral failure. My father's face darkened with anger and shame. "What are you saying?" he demanded, though the meaning was clear. My mother let out a small, pained sound. "But the wedding isn't until June," she said, as if this detail might somehow change the reality. "We're due in May," Kevin said quietly, standing to put his arm around Bethany. "We've moved the wedding to next month." "How could this happen?" my father thundered, rising from his chair. "You both know better. You were raised better." Bethany broke down, then sobbing as she admitted that she and Kevin had fallen into temptation during a weekend retreat with their young adults church group. Just once, she insisted, but that was all it took. I stood and moved to comfort my sister, but my father intercepted me with a glare. "This is what happens," he said, his voice cold with fury. "This is what happens when we let the world's values seep into our home." I froze, confused by his words and the way he was looking at me. "Thomas," my mother said, her voice shaking, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," my father replied. "This needs to be addressed now." He turned to me fully. "Ever since you moved to that city bringing your liberal ideas and worldly values back with you, things have changed. Bethany was steadfast until you started filling her head with your permissive attitudes." I was stunned. "What are you talking about? I had nothing to do with this." "You don't have to do anything directly," my mother interjected. "It's your influence, Sophie. The way you talk about your lifestyle in Chicago, like it's normal, like there's nothing wrong with living however you please without regard for God's law." I looked to Bethany for support, expecting her to defend me to clarify that I had nothing to do with her pregnancy. Instead, she looked down, wiping tears from her cheeks. "You always told me I needed to loosen up," she said softly. "That I was missing out on life by being so strict. About trying new foods or traveling or reading different books." I protested. "Not about this. I never once suggested you should sleep with Kevin before marriage." "But it's all connected," my father insisted. "Once you start picking and choosing which of God's commandments to follow, the rest fall like dominoes." The argument escalated quickly. Jackson tried to defend me, which only made things worse as my father accused him of being part of the problem. My grandmother attempted to calm everyone down, suggesting we all take a breath and remember it was Thanksgiving. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. As the shouting intensified, I noticed Kevin guiding Bethany out of the dining room, whispering something in her ear as they retreated to the living room. I felt abandoned, left alone to face my parents' irrational blame. "This is absurd," I finally said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Bethany is an adult who made her own choice. I had nothing to do with it, and frankly, the bigger issue right now should be supporting her, not finding someone to blame." My words only poured fuel on the fire. "Supporting her," my father repeated incredulously. "Is that what you call it? Enabling sin is not support, Sophie. It's destruction." He turned to where Bethany and Kevin sat in the living room, visible through the dining room doorway. "And as for you two," he continued, his voice firm but slightly calmer, "there are consequences for your actions. Bethany, you have a choice to make. You can break off this engagement with Kevin, give up this baby for adoption to a proper Christian family, and begin the process of repentance, or you can leave this house and this family." Bethany's sobs grew louder. Kevin's face paled. "Sir," he began, "we've made a mistake, but we love each other. We're getting married. We want to raise our child together." "Then you'll do it without our blessing or support," my father replied coldly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, you can't be serious. This is your daughter and your grandchild you're talking about." "Stay out of this, Sophie," my mother warned, but I couldn't. "No, I won't stay out of it. This is cruel and it's wrong. Bethany and Kevin made a choice that doesn't align with your beliefs, but they're handling it responsibly. They're getting married, they're keeping their baby. They're not abandoning their faith or their values. They're human, and they made a mistake. Isn't forgiveness supposed to be central to Christianity?" My father turned to me, his eyes cold. "You don't get to lecture us about Christianity, Sophie. Not when you've spent years undermining everything we taught you. Not when your influence is partly to blame for where we are now." "My influence?" I was incredulous. I live 200 miles away. I see Bethany a few times a year. How exactly am I influencing her? Every time you visit with your progressive ideas and your casual attitude toward sin, you plant seeds, my mother said. Every time you talk about your friends who live together before marriage or your church that accepts all kinds of ungodly behavior, you make it seem normal. Bethany has always looked up to you, even when she shouldn't have. I looked to Bethany expecting her to defend me, to acknowledge that her choices were her own. Instead, she met my gaze briefly before looking away. You always made me feel like I was missing out, she said quietly. Like I was naive and sheltered and stupid for following the rules. I never said that, I protested. Never. I just wanted you to think for yourself, not blindly follow what Mom and Dad said was right. And look where that got her, my father interjected. Pregnant out of wedlock, her reputation ruined, her witness destroyed. The conversation spiraled further as my parents laid out their demands. I had to admit that I was partly responsible for Bethany's moral failure. I had to apologize for bringing my corrupting influence into their home. I had to promise to return to their church and their way of life. I won't lie and say I caused something I didn't, I said firmly. I won't apologize for living my life authentically, and I certainly won't pretend to believe things I don't just to make you feel better. My father's face hardened. Then you've made your choice just as Bethany has made hers. What does that mean? I asked, though I already knew. It means that if you can't admit your part in this and commit to changing your ways, you're no longer welcome in this house or this family. The room spun around me. Jackson placed a steadying hand on my arm. My grandmother let out a distressed cry from her seat at the table. But my parents' expressions remained resolute, and Bethany wouldn't even look at me. You're choosing your pride over your family, my mother said, her voice breaking slightly. Just as you always have. I felt a surge of anger through my shock. No, you're choosing your reputation and your rigid beliefs over your daughters. Both of your daughters. In a daze, I went upstairs to the guest room, where Jackson and I had placed our overnight bags. We had planned to stay until Sunday. Now I was packing to leave permanently. Jackson helped silently, his face grim with concern. When I came back downstairs with our bags, my parents were in the living room with Bethany and Kevin. My father was speaking intensely to Kevin, probably laying out similar ultimatums. My mother was holding Bethany's hand, tears streaming down both their faces. None of them looked up as I reached the bottom of the stairs. Only my grandmother came to me, her aged hands gripping mine tightly. This will pass, she whispered. They're in shock now, but they'll come around. Don't let this break you, Sophie. I hugged her, breathing in her familiar scent of lavender and powder. I love you, Grandma. I'll call you, she promised. At the door, I turned back, hoping someone else would come to say goodbye, that someone would call this whole thing off as a terrible misunderstanding. But no one did. I caught Bethany's eye one last time, saw the conflict there, but she remained seated beside our mother. I hope you'll call when you're ready to talk, I said to the room at large. I love you all, even if you don't believe me right now. No one responded. Jackson and I walked out into the bitter November cold, the door closing firmly behind us. The drive back to Chicago was brutal. A snowstorm had moved in, forcing us to drive slowly through swirling white flakes that matched the numbness spreading through me. Jackson offered to take over, but I needed the focus that driving required, the necessity of staying alert when everything inside me wanted to collapse. They'll come around, Jackson said, somewhere in Indiana, echoing my grandmother's words. Once they've had time to process everything. I wasn't so sure. The looks on their faces, the finality in my father's voice, this felt different from our previous disagreements. This felt permanent. As we crossed the Illinois state line, I realized that for the first time in my life, I was truly on my own. No family safety net, no home to return to. Just me, my chosen friends, and whatever life I could build for myself now. The weeks following Thanksgiving were some of the darkest of my life. I moved through December like a ghost going through the motions at work, but unable to focus or care about marketing strategies and client presentations. My boss, Rachel, noticed, but gave me space, assuming I was just suffering from holiday blues. I tried calling Bethany repeatedly, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate. "Please call me back. I just want to know you're okay. I'm worried about you. I love you." After a week of silence, I discovered she had blocked my number. My parents were even more definitive in their rejection. My calls went straight to voicemail. Emails bounced back. When I tried to reach them through social media, I found I had been blocked there too. It was as if they had erased me completely. I thought about my grandmother's promise to call, but weeks passed with no word from her either. Later, I would learn that my father had taken her phone and monitored her calls, preventing her from reaching out to me. At the time, though, it just felt like another abandonment. Extended family members who had always sent Christmas cards or birthday messages suddenly went silent. Cousins I'd been close to stopped responding to texts. It became clear that my parents had spread their version of events throughout the family, casting me as the villain who had corrupted Bethany and then refused to take responsibility. Christmas was the hardest. It was the first one I'd ever spent away from family. Jackson invited me to join his family in Milwaukee, but I couldn't face the prospect of watching someone else's happy family celebration. Instead, I stayed in my apartment, ordered Chinese food, and binge-watched mindless TV shows while ignoring the holiday completely. New Year's Eve came and went with similar gloom. Colleagues invited me to parties, but I declined them all. The thought of forcing smiles and small talk was unbearable. I toasted the new year alone with a bottle of cheap champagne, making no resolutions except to somehow survive. My work began to suffer. Projects that would normally have excited me felt meaningless. Deadlines crept up unnoticed. In mid-January, Rachel finally called me into her office. "I don't know what's going on with you," she said gently, "but the Sophie I hired wouldn't let personal problems affect her work like this. Talk to me." Something about her directness, her genuine concern broke through the wall I'd built. I found myself telling her everything: my strict upbringing, Bethany's pregnancy, my parents' ultimatum, the complete cutoff from my family. By the end, I was sobbing in a way I hadn't allowed myself to do since that awful Thanksgiving night. Rachel listened without judgment, then did something unexpected. She shared her own story of family estrangement, how her parents had cut her off when she divorced her abusive husband because their religion forbade divorce under any circumstances. "It took me years to understand that their rejection wasn't about me," she said. "It was about their own rigid worldview being threatened. You can't take responsibility for their inability to adapt or to love unconditionally." She recommended her therapist, even offering to cover the first few sessions as part of the company's employee wellness program. "And Sophie," she added as I was leaving her office, "take next week off. Get some rest, talk to the therapist, and come back when you're ready to be present." That conversation was a turning point. I started therapy, began opening up to friends like Jackson about what I was going through, and slowly emerged from the fog of depression that had enveloped me. Jackson introduced me to his wider circle of friends, many of whom had their own stories of family rejection or estrangement. They welcomed me without question, including me in dinners, game nights, and weekend outings. Gradually, I started to feel less alone. My tiny one-bedroom apartment, which had felt like a prison during those dark winter months, slowly transformed into a sanctuary. I painted the walls, bought plants, hung art that I loved, rather than things I thought my parents would approve of. Each change, however small, felt like an affirmation. This is my space. This is my life. I get to choose. In therapy, I began to recognize patterns from my upbringing that had shaped me in ways I hadn't realized. The constant need for approval, the guilt that followed any act of self-prioritization, the belief that love was conditional on performance and conformity. Your parents taught you that love had to be earned, my therapist observed. But real love is given freely. It doesn't come with prerequisites or conditions. It was a simple statement, but it shook the foundation of how I understood relationships. If love didn't have to be earned, then maybe I was worthy of it just as I was. And if that was true, then my parents' rejection said more about them than it did about me. As winter melted into spring, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. At work, I not only caught up on projects I had neglected, but took on new challenges. Rachel assigned me to lead a major campaign for a fitness brand, and the creative freedom energized me. When the campaign launched in April and exceeded all expectations, I was promoted to senior marketing strategist with a substantial raise. The financial security of the promotion allowed me to move to a larger apartment in a neighborhood I loved. The process of furnishing and decorating my new space became a form of therapy, each choice a declaration of my values and preferences, not what someone else thought I should want. Jackson remained a steadfast friend, helping me move and introducing me to more people in his circle. Through him, I met Zoe, a graphic designer whose quick wit and warmth made her an instant friend. There was Michael, a high school teacher whose compassion for his students reminded me of what education should be about. And Danny, a chef who insisted on teaching me to cook properly, claiming my microwave dinners were a crime against humanity. This eclectic group became my chosen family. We celebrated birthdays together, nursed each other through breakups and job losses, and created our own traditions. Sunday brunches at Danny's apartment became sacred, a time when we could all share our triumphs and failures from the week without fear of judgment. In May, I began volunteering at a youth center in a disadvantaged neighborhood. Many of the teens there came from difficult home situations, some with absent parents, others with overly controlling ones. My own experiences helped me connect with them in a way other volunteers couldn't. "You really get it," 16-year-old Mia told me after sharing her frustrations about her mother's strict rules. "Most adults just take her side automatically." "I can understand both sides," I replied honestly. Parents usually want what's best for their kids, but sometimes they confuse control with protection. And sometimes what they think is best isn't what you need. Working with these teenagers gave me a sense of purpose beyond my career. I helped them with college applications, resume writing, and interview skills. I listened to their dreams and frustrations without trying to impose my own values on them. In doing for them what no one had done for me, providing support without conditions, I found a profound healing. Around the same time, I started a small side business, doing freelance graphic design work for local businesses. It began as a hobby, a creative outlet separate from my day job, but quickly grew as clients referred me to others. The extra income went into savings, building a financial safety net that gave me a sense of security I'd never had before. My therapist noted the change in me during our sessions. "You're standing taller," she observed. "Speaking more confidently. How does that feel?" "Like I'm finally becoming the person I was always meant to be," I replied, without apology. There were still hard days, of course. Mother's Day was particularly difficult, as was Bethany's birthday in June. I sent cards to both my sister and my mother, knowing they would probably go unread, but needing to make the gesture anyway. None were returned, but none received a response either. Through my grandmother's neighbor, whom I'd connected with on social media before being blocked by my parents, I learned that Bethany had given birth to a baby boy in early May and had married Kevin in a small ceremony in February. There were no pictures, no details beyond these basic facts, but knowing my sister and nephew were healthy brought me some peace. As summer turned to fall, I realized it had been almost a year since that fateful Thanksgiving. The approaching holiday season no longer filled me with dread as it had the year before. This time, I had plans. Friendsgiving at Danny's, a Christmas gift exchange with my volunteer colleagues New Year's Eve in New York with Jackson and some of his friends. For the first time, I wasn't grieving what I had lost, but celebrating what I had found. My chosen family might not share my blood, but they shared something more important: unconditional acceptance and genuine love. They knew my flaws and my strengths and embraced all of me without demanding I change to earn their affection. I had just marked the official 1-year anniversary of my family estrangement by treating myself to a fancy dinner at a restaurant I'd always wanted to try when the text came. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was getting ready for work, NPR playing in the background as I applied mascara. The notification sound made me reach for my phone, absently expecting a message from a colleague or friend. When I saw Mom on the screen, I nearly dropped my mascara wand into the sink. The message was simple. "We need to talk. Can we call you?" 5 words that sent my carefully reconstructed world tilting on its axis. My hands shook so badly I had to sit down on the edge of my bathtub. I stared at those 5 words until they blurred my breath, coming in quick, shallow gasps. It felt like all the progress I'd made over the past year was suddenly in jeopardy, my hard-won peace threatened by this unexpected intrusion from my past. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the morning pacing my apartment. Should I respond? Ignore the message? Block their number as they had blocked mine? Every option seemed simultaneously right and wrong. In the end, I called my therapist and managed to get an emergency session that afternoon. She listened as I described my conflicted feelings, the lingering hope for reconciliation, warring with the fear of being hurt again, the curiosity about what had prompted this contact after a year of silence competing with anger that they thought they could simply re-enter my life on their terms. "What do you want to happen?" she asked when I finally ran out of words. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to tell them to go to hell. Part of me wants my family back. But I don't think I can have the relationship I want with them, one based on mutual respect and acceptance." "Then perhaps the question isn't whether to respond, but how to respond in a way that protects the boundaries you've established for yourself," she suggested. With her guidance, I crafted a brief reply. "I'm open to talking. Text me when would be a good time to call." By putting the ball back in their court and requesting a specific time, rather than dropping everything to call immediately, I was asserting some control over the situation. It was a small thing, but it helped me feel less reactive and more deliberate in my choices. My mother responded later that evening, suggesting we talk the following day at 7. I agreed, then spent a restless night rehearsing what I would say, imagining their explanations and apologies, preparing myself for disappointment. When my phone rang at exactly 7 o'clock, I took a deep breath and answered with a simple, "Hello?" "Sophie, it's Mom and Dad. We have you on speakerphone." My mother's voice was tentative, lacking its usual authoritative tone. "Hi," I said, not offering more. There was an awkward pause before my father spoke. "How have you been, Sophie?" The banality of the question after a year of silence almost made me laugh. "I've been rebuilding my life after being disowned," I replied evenly. "It's been challenging, but rewarding. How have you been?" Another pause. I could almost see them exchanging glances, trying to decide how to respond to my directness. "We've had a difficult year," my mother finally said. "Bethany had her baby, your nephew Samuel. He's 6 months old now. And she and Kevin are married, of course." "I know," I said. "I heard through the grapevine." "Oh." She seemed surprised that news had reached me. "Well, they're living in the guest house on our property for now. Kevin's working at his father's church, and Bethany's staying home with the baby." I waited, not filling the silence with questions or comments. After a moment, my father cleared his throat. The thing is, Sophie, a lot has changed since last Thanksgiving. We've had to find a new church. Our old congregation wasn't as understanding about Bethany's situation as we'd hoped. This was surprising. My parents had been members of that church for over 30 years. They asked you to leave. Not in so many words, my mother said, her voice tight with remembered hurt. But the gossip, the way people looked at us, the way Bethany was treated, it became unbearable. Pastor Johnson suggested we might be more comfortable elsewhere. That must have been painful, I said, meaning it despite everything. I knew how central that church community had been to my parents' identity and social life. It was a wake-up call, my father admitted. We'd given everything to that church for decades, and when we needed grace and support, they offered judgment instead. I could hear the irony in his statement, though I doubted he could. Wasn't that exactly what they had done to me? We've been attending a smaller church across town, my mother continued. It's different, more flexible in some ways. The pastor there has been helping us work through some things. He suggested it might be time to reach out to you to try to heal our family. I see, I said carefully. And what exactly are you hoping for from this conversation? There was a pause before my father spoke again. We miss you, Sophie. We've realized that family should come first before pride or even certain principles. We'd like to find a way forward to have you back in our lives. His words sounded rehearsed, like something the new pastor might have suggested he say. There was no acknowledgement of the harm they had caused, no true apology for cutting me out of their lives. Just a vague desire to find a way forward now that it suited them. I appreciate you reaching out, I said, choosing my words carefully. But I need to understand something first. What's changed? Why now, after a year of complete silence? My mother sighed. We've had time to reflect, to see things differently. Losing our church community made us realize how important family truly is. It wasn't lost on me that their epiphany had come only after experiencing rejection themselves, not from any genuine re-examination of how they had treated me. We'd like to see you, my father added. We could come to Chicago, maybe have dinner somewhere, talk face to face. The thought of seeing them in person sent a wave of anxiety through me, but I also knew that any real resolution would require more than a phone call. I need to think about it, I said. This is all very sudden. Of course, my mother said quickly. Take your time. We just wanted you to know that we're ready to make amends. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time processing the conversation. They wanted to reconcile, but on what terms? They missed me, but did they accept me? They had experienced rejection and found it painful, but did they recognize that they had inflicted the same pain on me? I called Jackson and filled him in on the conversation. They want to visit Chicago and meet up, I concluded. How do you feel about that? He asked. Confused, hopeful, terrified, angry, all of the above. You don't have to decide tonight, he reminded me. And whatever you decide, you have people in your corner now. I thought about that as I got ready for bed. I did have people in my corner, friends who loved me for exactly who I was, not who they wanted me to be. That knowledge gave me strength. Whatever happened with my parents, I would not be facing it alone. The next day, I texted my mother. I'm willing to meet when you come to Chicago. Let me know what dates you're considering. I'd prefer somewhere public, like a coffee shop. Setting the boundary of a public meeting place was deliberate. I wanted neutral territory, somewhere I could leave if things became too difficult. Somewhere we would all be on our best behavior. They suggested the following weekend, and we settled on a quiet cafe near my apartment. As the day approached, I prepared myself emotionally with the help of my therapist and friends. I knew I needed to be clear about my expectations and boundaries to resist falling back into old patterns of seeking approval or accepting blame that wasn't mine. The night before our meeting, I wrote out what I wanted to say, not as a script, but as a way to clarify my own thoughts. I wasn't looking for a full reconciliation, immediately too much damage had been done for that. But I was open to beginning a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than authority and submission. Whether my parents were capable of that remained to be seen. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived 15 minutes early to secure a table in the corner where we could talk with some privacy. I ordered a latte and tried to calm my racing heart as I waited, watching the door with growing anxiety. They arrived exactly on time. Punctuality had always been a point of pride for my father. I almost didn't recognize them at first. My father looked older, his hair grayer, his posture less commanding than I remembered. My mother had lost weight, and the stylish haircut she had maintained for decades had grown out, replaced by a simpler style that aged her. I stood as they approached, unsure of the appropriate greeting after a year of estrangement. My mother solved the dilemma by stepping forward to embrace me, holding on a beat too long. My father followed with a more awkward hug, patting my back stiffly. "You look well," my mother said as we sat down. "I like your hair." I had cut my long hair into a short bob, a change that would have horrified her a year ago. "Thanks," I replied. "How was your trip?" We made small talk about their drive, the traffic, the weather-safe topics that filled the space, while we all adjusted to being in each other's presence again. They ordered coffee and pastries, and I noticed my father wince slightly at the prices. The economic reality of city life had always been a point of contention between us. Once the pleasantries were exhausted, an uncomfortable silence fell. I waited, refusing to be the one to broach the real reason for our meeting. After a moment, my father cleared his throat. "Sophie, we want you to know that we've missed you this past year," he began. "Holidays haven't been the same without you. Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking and, well, we realize we may have been too harsh last Thanksgiving." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had expected. "It was a difficult situation for everyone," my mother added. "We were shocked about Bethany's pregnancy, worried about the church's reaction, afraid for her future. We weren't at our best." "You blamed me for something I had nothing to do with," I said quietly. "And when I wouldn't accept that blame, you cut me out of your lives completely. For a year. No calls, no messages, nothing. Do you understand how painful that was?" They exchanged glances. "We were hurt too," my father said. "We felt you were choosing your lifestyle over your family's values." "That's not what happened," I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. "You gave me an ultimatum: admit I corrupted Bethany or leave. That wasn't a choice. It was an impossible demand based on a false premise." My mother reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but gesturing toward it. "We may have misunderstood some things. Pastor Williams at our new church has helped us see that families can disagree on certain issues, but still remain connected through love." I looked at her closely, trying to discern if this represented a genuine shift in perspective or just a change in rhetoric. "What exactly are you hoping for here? What does reconnecting look like to you?" "We'd like to start fresh," my father said. "Put the past behind us and move forward as a family. We'd like you to meet your nephew to reconnect with Bethany. Perhaps you could come home for Christmas this year." "And what about the issues that led to our estrangement? Have those changed? Would I be welcome to bring a friend like Jackson? Would you accept my life choices without constant judgment or attempts to change me?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "We may not always agree with your choices, Sophie, but we're trying to be more understanding." "That's not the same as acceptance," I pointed out. "And frankly, after what happened, trying isn't enough. I need to know that if I let you back into my life, you won't discard me again the next time I don't meet your expectations." "That's not fair," my mother protested. "We came all this way." "After a year of silence," I interrupted, A year in which I sent cards, left messages, tried to maintain some connection while you blocked me at every turn. So yes, I think it's entirely fair for me to question your commitment to this reconciliation. My directness clearly surprised them. The daughter they remembered had been more likely to withdraw from conflict than confront it head-on. "What do you want from us, Sophie?" my father asked, a hint of his old authoritative tone creeping back in. "I want honesty," I replied. "So, let me ask you directly, why did you really cut me off? Was it actually about Bethany, or was that just the breaking point for issues you already had with my life choices?" They looked at each other again, having one of those silent marital communications I'd observed throughout my childhood. Finally, my mother spoke. "We were embarrassed," she admitted softly. "Not just about Bethany's pregnancy, but about losing control of both our daughters. When people at church would ask about you living in the city unmarried, attending that progressive church, it reflected poorly on us, like we had failed as parents. So you needed someone to blame," I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "And I was the easier target because I was already the black sheep." "That's not fair," my father began, but my mother touched his arm. "It's more complicated than that, but yes, there's some truth to it," she acknowledged. "We were wrong to blame you for Bethany's choices. We were wrong to cut you off. We see that now." It was the closest thing to a real apology I had heard from them. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I've built a good life here," I said. "I have friends who accept me completely, work that fulfills me, a community that supports me. I didn't just survive losing my family, I thrived despite it. And I won't risk what I've built by allowing people back into my life who see me as a problem to be fixed rather than a person to be loved." "We do love you, Sophie," my mother said, tears in her eyes. "I believe you love me the best way you know how," I replied. "But love without respect and acceptance isn't what I need. So here's what I can offer. We can begin rebuilding a relationship, but slowly, with clear boundaries. Phone calls, occasional visits, getting to know each other as the adults we are now, not the parent-child dynamic we had before." "And Bethany, will you try to reconnect with her too?" my father asked. "If she wants that, yes, but that's between me and Bethany." "She didn't come because she's still hurt," my mother explained. "She feels you judged her that night, that you were more concerned with defending yourself than supporting her." I had to laugh at the irony. I was literally the only person at that table defending her right to keep her baby and marry the man she loved. "That's not how she remembers it," my father said. "Then we definitely have things to discuss. But again, that's between us." We talked for another hour, working out the parameters of our tentative reconnection. I made it clear that I wouldn't be visiting their home immediately, that I needed to see evidence of real change before investing too deeply in the relationship again. They agreed, though I could tell my father especially struggled with not being in control of the process. As we prepared to leave, my mother handed me a small envelope. "Pictures of Samuel," she said. "Your nephew. He has your smile." I opened it to find several photos of a chubby-cheeked baby with bright eyes and a gummy grin. Despite everything, I felt a pang of connection to this little person who shared my blood. "He's beautiful," I said sincerely. "We're staying at the Holiday Inn until tomorrow afternoon," my father said. "If you wanted to have breakfast before we head back." I hesitated, then nodded. "Text me in the morning. We'll see." We parted with awkward hugs again, none of us quite sure how to navigate this new, undefined relationship. As I watched them walk to their car, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the meeting was over, cautious hope that healing might be possible, lingering anger at what they had put me through, and a deep sadness for the simple, unconditional relationship we would never have. But most of all, I felt a profound sense of my own strength. I had faced my deepest fear rejection by the people who were supposed to love me most and survived. Not only survived, but emerged stronger, clearer about who I was and what I deserved. Walking back to my apartment, I texted my friends who had been on standby for emotional support. It went okay, not great, not terrible. We'll fill you in tomorrow at brunch. Then I called Jackson, who had offered to come over immediately after the meeting. I think I'm actually okay on my own tonight, I told him. I need some time to process. Proud of you, he said. Call if you need anything, anytime. I spent that evening quietly reflecting on the meeting, sorting through my feelings without judgment. My parents wanted to reconcile, but on terms that still prioritized their comfort over my autonomy. They had experienced a measure of the rejection they had inflicted on me, and it had softened them somewhat, but not fundamentally changed their worldview. Could we build a new kind of relationship from these complicated beginnings? I wasn't sure. But I knew with absolute certainty that whatever happened, I would be okay. 3 weeks later, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner in my apartment. Not for my biological family, that bridge was still being carefully reconstructed, but for my chosen family. Jackson was there along with Zoe, Michael, Danny, and a few others who had become central to my life over the past year. As we gathered around my table, sharing food and laughter and stories, I looked at these people who loved me exactly as I was, who had supported me through the darkest period of my life, without judgment or condition, and I felt a profound gratitude. I'd like to make a toast, I said, raising my glass. To family, not always the one we're born into, but the one we create through love, acceptance, and showing up for each other. Thank you all for being mine. As glasses clinked and smiles warmed the room, I knew that whatever happened with my parents and Bethany in the future, I had already found what I had been seeking all along, a place where I belonged completely, just as I was. Have you ever had to choose your own happiness over family expectations? Share your experience in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you for being part of my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is more healing than the family we're born into.